Ukraine, a country nestled in Eastern Europe, has long been caught in a geopolitical tug-of-war. Its strategic position and rich resources have made it a focal point for power struggles. Its fertile plains and strategic location have attracted the ambitions of empires for centuries. The land has been a coveted prize for those seeking to expand their influence. From the Mongols to the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union, Ukraine has witnessed its share of turmoil. Each era brought new challenges and shifts in power. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 offered a glimpse of hope for independence and self-determination. For the first time in decades, Ukraine saw a future where it could chart its own course. Ukraine declared its independence, a decision ratified by a referendum in which the majority voted to break free from Moscow's grip. This was a monumental step towards sovereignty. However, the legacy of Soviet rule cast a long shadow. The remnants of Soviet influence were deeply embedded in the nation's infrastructure and psyche. Ukraine inherited a complex mix of Russian-speaking and Ukrainian-speaking populations, particularly in its eastern and southern regions. This linguistic diversity often led to internal tensions. This linguistic and cultural divide would prove to be a fertile ground for future conflict. The differences in language and culture sometimes created rifts within communities. Russia never quite accepted Ukraine's independence as final, viewing the country as an integral part of its historical sphere of influence. This perspective fueled ongoing tensions. The seeds of the current conflict were sown in the years following Ukraine's independence. The struggle for control and influence over Ukraine continued to simmer, setting the stage for future confrontations. In 2004, Ukraine became the epicenter of a political earthquake known as the Orange Revolution. What began as protests against a rigged presidential election quickly transformed into a mass movement demanding fair elections and democratic reforms. The people of Ukraine were determined to have their voices heard and to ensure that their votes counted. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians took to the streets, braving freezing temperatures and the threat of government crackdown. They stood united, despite the harsh winter, showing incredible resilience and solidarity. The Orange Revolution signaled a rejection of Russian influence and a yearning for closer ties with the West. This was not just a political statement but a cultural and ideological shift towards European values and democracy. The protests forced the Ukrainian government to annul the fraudulent election results and hold a new internationally monitored vote, which Viktor Yushchenko won. This victory was seen as a triumph for democracy and the rule of law. However, the Orange Revolution exposed deep divisions within Ukrainian society. The country was not unified in its vision for the future, leading to ongoing tensions and conflicts. The country remained split between those who looked to Russia and those who saw Ukraine's future aligned with the West. This division would continue to shape Ukraine's political landscape for years to come, influencing its policies and international relations. The annexation of Crimea in 2014 marked a turning point in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Following the Euromaidan Revolution, which ousted pro-Russian President Viktor Yanukovych, Russia moved swiftly to seize control of Crimea. Russian troops, without insignia, took control of key infrastructure and military bases. A hastily organized referendum, widely condemned as illegitimate, claimed overwhelming support for Crimea's secession from Ukraine and unification with Russia. The annexation of Crimea marked the beginning of hybrid warfare, combining military force with disinformation campaigns, cyber attacks, and economic pressure. While the world's attention was focused on Crimea, another front in the Ukraine-Russia conflict was about to ignite. In the eastern Ukrainian regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, a separatist movement, fueled by Russian propaganda and supported by Russian arms and fighters, began to gain momentum. Pro-Russian separatists seized government buildings, declared independence from Ukraine, and engaged in armed clashes with Ukrainian forces. The conflict in the Donbass quickly escalated into a full-blown war. Russia, while denying direct military involvement, provided substantial support to the separatists. Thousands of people have been killed, and millions have been displaced from their homes. The region has become a humanitarian crisis with widespread destruction and economic hardship. David versus Goliath military capabilities and strategies. The Ukraine-Russia conflict pits Ukraine, a relatively small and under-equipped military, against Russia, a global military power. On paper, Russia holds a significant military advantage over Ukraine. However, Military superiority on paper does not always translate into victory on the battlefield. Ukraine has mounted a fierce and determined defense, utilizing their knowledge of the terrain and innovative tactics. Ukraine's military strategy has focused on a combination of conventional defense, guerrilla warfare, and the use of sophisticated Western-supplied weapon systems. Russia has relied heavily on its overwhelming firepower, often employing a scorched earth strategy. The weight of sanctions, economic realities of war. The Ukraine-Russia conflict is not only a military confrontation, but also an economic war. The West has imposed unprecedented sanctions on Russia, targeting its financial institutions, energy sector, and oligarchs close to President Vladimir Putin. These sanctions are designed to cripple the Russian economy and pressure Putin to end the war in Ukraine. The economic consequences of the conflict have been felt globally, contributing to rising energy prices, inflation, and supply chain disruptions. The ability of Ukraine to withstand the economic shock of the war and the willingness of the West to maintain sanctions on Russia will be critical factors in the months and years to come. The global stage, international support, and its impact. The Ukraine-Russia conflict has become a focal point of international relations, drawing in global powers. The United States and its NATO allies have provided Ukraine with billions of dollars worth of military aid. This support has been crucial in bolstering Ukraine's defenses. However, the West has been reluctant to intervene militarily, fearing a direct confrontation with Russia. The conflict has also exposed divisions within the international community, with some countries refraining from criticizing Moscow. The fog of war uncertainties cloud the future. Predicting the outcome of the Ukraine-Russia conflict is fraught with uncertainty. The situation on the ground is constantly evolving, and the fog of war obscures many key details. Both sides have demonstrated a willingness to escalate, raising the stakes of the conflict. One factor is the potential for the conflict to escalate beyond Ukraine's borders. Another uncertainty stems from the internal situation in Russia and the long-term impact of economic sanctions. Finally, the resilience and determination of the Ukrainian people will play a pivotal role in shaping the conflict's trajectory. The Ukrainian people have shown remarkable courage and resolve in the face of Russian aggression. Scenarios for the future, from negotiated peace to frozen conflict. The situation remains fluid and unpredictable, with each scenario carrying its own set of challenges and implications. Given the complexities and uncertainties surrounding the Ukraine-Russia conflict, several potential scenarios for its future are possible. Analysts and experts continue to debate the likelihood of each outcome, considering the ever-changing dynamics on the ground. One scenario involves a negotiated settlement, however difficult to achieve that may seem now. Such a settlement would require significant concessions from both sides and a willingness to compromise, which has been elusive thus far. Another scenario is a protracted war of attrition, with neither side able to achieve a decisive victory. This could lead to a prolonged period of instability and suffering for the civilian population, as both sides continue to engage in sporadic clashes. This could result in a frozen conflict, with a ceasefire line separating Ukrainian-controlled territory from Russian-occupied areas. Such a situation would likely lead to a tense and uneasy peace, with the potential for future flare-ups. A third scenario involves a decisive Russian victory, with Russia achieving its military objectives and installing a pro-Russian government in Kyiv. This would dramatically alter the political landscape of the region and have far-reaching consequences for international relations. Ultimately, the future of the Ukraine-Russia conflict hinges on a multitude of factors, including the military situation on the ground and the effectiveness of Western sanctions. The international community continues to watch closely, hoping for a resolution that brings lasting peace and stability to the region. The human cost, a reminder amidst the geopolitics. Amidst the geopolitical maneuvering, it's crucial to remember the human cost of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Millions of Ukrainians have been displaced from their homes, seeking refuge in neighboring countries or in safer parts of Ukraine. Families have been torn apart, homes and livelihoods destroyed, and a generation scarred by the trauma of war. The international community must prioritize the protection of civilians and ensure the delivery of humanitarian aid. A call to action, your role in shaping the narrative. The Ukraine-Russia conflict is not just a distant war, It's a defining moment for our world. It's a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the importance of international law. It's also a call to action for each of us to engage in informed dialogue and challenge disinformation. Educate yourself about the conflict and support reputable news organizations. Be wary of propaganda and disinformation. Consider donating to humanitarian organizations working to alleviate the suffering of those affected by the conflict. Contact your elected officials and urge them to support Ukraine. Engage in respectful dialogue with others and strive to find common ground.